welcome to the Operational Case Study Strategic Analysis for Ashworth Lea, and this is for the Operational Case Study May 2017. So let's just do a quick introduction to the case. So automotive manufacturing is obviously the focus for this case study, and that will be a treat for many of you who are familiar with the car industry, perhaps not so much for those of you who aren't familiar with the car industry, but either way, the car industry is huge. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's plenty for us to get our teeth stuck into and take a look at. The case company, Ashworth Lea, is a car manufacturer. They produce cars. They're based in Mainland. They produced high-quality, reliable, premium cars for a high price. And they're sort of similar in many ways to companies like Aston Martin as a real-life company example. Okay, so what's the point in this video? What are you going to get out of it? So for the strategic analysis, we're going to be using the rational planning model in order to come up with a business strategy. Now, looking at this diagram here, hopefully you can see how we're going to do that. So we're going to start on this side, on the right-hand side, by looking at the future. And we're going to be thinking about the missions and objectives for Ashworth Lea, where they want to be headed for the future. So we're going to be looking at their governance and their ethics. We're going to be thinking about critical success factors, and we're going to be doing stakeholder mapping as well. So once we have that in mind, once we know where they want to go, we're going to look at where the business is now. So we've decided where they want to be in the future. We're going to look at their current position. We're going to be looking at their business environment. We'll do a pastel analysis. We'll look at their value chain. And we're going to do a market analysis as well of the brand and the 4 Ps of marketing. So getting an idea of where they are now, where they want to be in the future, that's going to help us come up with a business strategy for the company, and one that is specifically designed to take them from where they currently are to where they want to be. And that's the general idea behind the rational planning model, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video. So getting on with the first step then, we're looking to the future and where the company is heading, where it wants to be. And to do that, we're going to look at these 3 key areas: critical success factors, governance and ethics, and stakeholder mapping. So let's think about the mission to start with. So what is the organization all about, and why does it exist? And what we're going to do now is look at mission statements, and we're going to look across these 4 key headings here, and we're going to try and come up with some answers specifically relating to Ashworth Lea. So thinking about purpose then, there are 2 key questions. Why does the organization exist, and what does it intend to achieve in the long term? So we might say that the organization exists in order to produce high quality, reliable cars, and in the long term, their aim is to be a leading manufacturer of these kinds of cars. So we have an idea of their purpose. Let's think about the strategy. So how will the organization compete, and the range of businesses it is operating within? So at Ashworth Lea, obviously there is an emphasis on quality. That is something on which they pride themselves, and this helps them to produce what we could call potentially iconic cars, which are very highly desirable and are sort of very internationally, instantly recognizable across the world. So what are the values of the organization? So we've slightly touched on that already, but certainly there is an emphasis on quality. That is a value very close to the heart of Ashworth Lea, and perhaps also innovation as well. They want to make sure that they're not just good quality, but they're also pushing cars forward and making sure that they are developing new kinds of cars and new technologies in order to make sure that they can compete and stay relevant in the marketplace. And so now we can move on to policies, and these are the things that the people at the company are expected to follow with regards to performing the basic strategy of the business. So again, it's very, very high quality. That's the main emphasis for Ashworth Lea, and perhaps we could say one of the policies would be that we make the best cars in the world, and that's something that is definitely true of Ashworth Lea. They seem to be keen on making the best cars that can possibly be made. And that could perhaps be the mission statement for the company. So looking at these 4 key areas and feeding that all together, we can kind of come up with this idea that Ashworth Lea are trying to make the best quality or the best cars that can possibly be made. And that might be a guiding mission statement for them to abide by. Okay, so moving on to objectives and performance measurement. So if we say that the mission or the strategy is to produce the best cars in the world, then what kind of objectives and performance measurements could be put in place in order to attain this strategy? So a few specific objectives we might have by looking at the pre-scene. There might be a target to have very highly qualified staff so that only the best staff are working on making the best cars. We have really high quality materials that ensure that the cars are all really high quality in their finished form. There could be a target to have no cutting corners, so no cutting of costs unless it's absolutely necessary. But on the whole, the concern isn't with cost, it is with quality. And there needs to be a focus on new technology as well. So new technologies are obviously going to enable the company to make better quality products more efficiently. So they're likely to have more specific strategies that we're not told about, and that's likely to be the case. We might learn a bit more about strategies in the exam if there is a question on mission statements, for example. But if in the exam there is no more information given about strategies, then this is a weakness in the company and this is something we could potentially comment on. And obviously the balanced scorecard would work here too, because there's little evidence of robust non-financial performance measurement in the actual pre-scene itself. Okay, so let's move on to another area of looking at the future, and that's going to be critical success factors. Now, critical success factors, these are things the organization must do well in order to succeed. It's critical, therefore, that each critical success factor for the case study organization is developed and improved to ensure that it is a strength of the business. So if in the exam a new strategy is suggested and it fits with the current critical success factors, then you should probably support that. And on the other side of it, if it is something that doesn't support the critical success factors, then it is perhaps something to be more critical and wary of. So the critical success factors for Ashworth Lea based on the pre-scene are the following. So obviously they have a global reputation for excellent quality among customers. They have very reliable, high quality cars, and that is something they're known for not only among their customers, but a lot just generally in the car industry as well. They have a long-standing brand and reputation, so they've been around for 100 years or more. And they've had plenty of time to establish themselves as a producer of high quality, reliable vehicles. Another one is the fact that they are open to innovation and new products. So obviously in the pre-scene we learned that there has been significant investment in electric cars. And we also know that they've just developed a brand new driverless car to be released in 2017. And so obviously it's a company that are open to innovation and developing new products, and perhaps understand that they need to do this, particularly as the car industry seems to be in the middle of a huge change. Okay, so we'll move on to a stakeholder analysis next. So obviously the stakeholders are the people who are affected in some way by what the organization does. So for example, a stakeholder of a company may be the customers, and they're obviously affected by the kind of products or services that a company is providing. Another stakeholder would be investors or shareholders, and they're affected by the strategy of the company and how they are making profits. Another stakeholder might be lenders, people who are lending money to the company, and they're affected by the company's profits and ability to pay back their debts. With regards to all this, organizational objectives should always be considered in relation to the objectives of different stakeholders. So there's no good having new strategies or an idea of where your company wants to be without first thinking about how that would impact all the stakeholders, because stakeholders can have a profound influence on how the company is able to operate. Therefore, when it comes to the actual exam itself, if there are any new projects, new investments, new areas of business that are suggested, the most important thing you can do when you're analysing this is to think about the various stakeholders involved and whether or not it's something that they would benefit from or whether they would be negatively impacted by this new investment. And you need to think about, well, whether that stakeholder is important enough to the company that they need to be catered to, or whether it is something, a stakeholder that is less important and therefore their needs can be overlooked in this specific instance. So in order to do this, you need to be thinking about or referring to Mendelow's matrix. It's going to be very handy for you to have done this before you go into the exam, so you have a good idea of where stakeholders are mapped before you even get started. So we've done exactly that. We've used Mendelow's matrix to map the various stakeholders for Ashworth Lea, and we have them in the grid here. So the low interest, low power, so the minimal interest, that's going to be customers. Now that doesn't mean that customers can be completely ignored. It just means that they have low power and perhaps low interest on the specifics of how the company is run. But that doesn't mean you can go and completely change the way the business is operated. For instance, Ashworth Lea are known for their brand and their image. They kind of have collectible cars, very classy, cool, like desirable cars. If they suddenly started changing the way that they make cars, customers are going to be less interested, particularly loyal customers. They want Ashworth Lea cars to be Ashworth Lea cars, so to speak. And so though they are at minimal interest, you still need to make sure that any major changes to the company aren't going to just lose all of the customers. Moving down, similarly low interest but higher power, you have governments and banks. So the government, in the pre-scene, we know that the government have offered a kind of grant scheme so that 4 million mainland dollars can be claimed in order to invest in the development of electronic hydrogen fuel cell cars. But in other terms as well, obviously the government, you're thinking about them in terms of a tax authority as well, and so they obviously need to be kept satisfied in that sense. And the same goes for the bank, and obviously Ashworth Lea have taken out significant loans, long-term loans in the past year, and so the bank are now very much interested in getting that money back. Now that doesn't put them in the high interest area. Obviously their interest in the specifics of the way the business is run is still fairly low, but they have high power in terms of changing the terms of the loan, and when you owe someone a lot of money, obviously they have power over you. Moving across to high interest, then we have the keep informed section, and there we have employees and suppliers. Now employees, obviously individually they don't have much power. Obviously as a whole unit, if there's a union for example, then they have more power in that case, and we might shift them up to high power. But individually they tend to have low power, but obviously a high interest in the way the company works, because any major changes are going to directly impact them. For example, if the company goes down the route of electric vehicles, all of the staff there that are trained and know how to make petrol cars but not electric cars, suddenly going to find themselves in a tricky position. The same goes for suppliers as well. So as the company changes and perhaps they need different kinds of materials, suppliers are people that they're benefiting from good relationships with suppliers at the moment. So even though they may have low power, you can go elsewhere for suppliers. It's in their interest to keep them informed on any changes so that those relationships can be maintained. And then finally you have the key players who need to be kept close, and in this case we're talking about key management personnel, so the executives or the directors at the top of the company. Any major new projects need to really have buy-in from all the major directors in order for it to be successful. And the same goes for investors. Now, obviously, there are a few investors at Ashworth Lea. You have the original owners, the family members of the original founders of the company. You have DOM, who were the company that came in 30 years ago and turned the company around and perhaps saved them from bankruptcy. And you have the investment group, who are now own 45% of the company, who are obviously a major shareholder for the company. Okay, so there's the stakeholder mapping for Ashworth Lea, and it would be good to keep this in mind and have this ready to pull out in the exam itself, because knowing where the each stakeholder lies within this matrix gives you straight away a good idea of what needs to be done in order to manage them with regards to any new projects. What remains for me to say is thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And I'll just take a few moments of your time, if I could, to just tell you about some of the other case study materials that we offer. So one of the things is a study text. Now this is a study text specifically aimed at the case study, and we have one for each level. So we have an operational, management and strategic level one, and they're designed to help you pass the study. They're in two halves. The first half is exam tips and exam strategy and advice on how to answer questions and all the really useful kind of tips that you need going into these exams and how to prepare for them. And then the second half, the second part of those, is a recap of the key theory that always comes up in the case studies again and again. So those are really useful, really valuable thing that you can get. Those are available online, and you can get an actual textbook, a printed physical textbook for the old-fashioned among you who like to do it that way still. We also have course videos that correspond with that study text as well. So we have a series of really nicely well-produced, well-done videos in which we basically take you through exactly what's involved in the case study and how you can spend your time preparing for it to ensure that you get really good marks. It's really great series of videos there. We've got the pre-scene analysis, which the video you just watched is an example of the pre-scene analysis, and there'll be several more videos just like that where we look at every tiny detail of the pre-scene and we relate it back to the P1 or F1 or E1, and we relate it to real life scenarios, relate it to actual business and analysis tools, and we give you the what we expect to be the top 10 issues. Another thing that we do slightly different is the industry analysis, and that is this is a really great document in which we basically cover everything that's relevant to the industry for the particular business that we're looking at. And it goes from their history through to the customers and suppliers and the market and how the market has functioned and the history of that. And we've got statistics in there and diagrams, and it's full of information. It's so useful. And at the end of that pack, we also have 25 actual industry examples. So real life things that have happened in that industry, that kind of examples of things that might actually happen to the company in the exam. So it gives you a sense of the kind of things that are going on in the industry and how real life businesses in that industry have coped with it. We have mock exams, which are, if you were going to pick any one of these to do, I would suggest it was the mock exams, because nothing prepares you for the exam more than actually sitting a mock exam. And if I were a student taking this, I would certainly put mock exams at the top of my list, along with marking and feedback. Now, our mock exams are actually designed to match the way that the actual CIMA exams are, so you can sit them on your laptop and they'll be timed and automatic, and they are as close as you are going to get to the real thing. And you can get marking and feedback on that as well, which is probably the most valuable thing you could probably get. To get specific feedback from a marker who deals with this exam 4 times a year, that's the best way for you to improve your ability to pass this exam as quickly as possible. We also have a masterclass. So as an online company, we hold an online masterclass which you can sign up for, and it's a day over the weekend. We do the Saturday and a Sunday, and it's a full day's worth of we have an expert who takes an online seminar, and we go through everything specific to that case study that you can do to get prepared for the exam. And we cover all sorts, and it's very popular among students who like a one-on-one kind of classroom environment in an online
in an online situation. We also offer pass guarantee. So if you're unlucky enough to not pass your exam the first time round, then there's no worries, because we give you the option. If you choose a pass guarantee option, then as long as you hit all the minimum requirements that we ask, and you don't pass, then you get access to our materials for the next sitting, completely free of charge. So there's something that we're doing to try and get you. Hopefully, if you signed up to our course and you do everything that we say you should do, then you probably will pass first time. That tends to be the way it goes. But if you should be unfortunate, if it's a particularly tough exam, then we'll let you have another go for free. So that's it. Thanks again for watching. Remember, my name is James. You can find me on Facebook, James Nutting Astranti, where I'll be posting all sorts of information about the upcoming exam in February. Make sure you check that out, because there's always something to talk about with regards to that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.